Welcome to Taiwan Talk with me, Sheree Felice. For this week's segment, we will be speaking to Connie Chiang. Connie is the co-founder and director of the Taiwan S.P.C.A., also known as the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. I'll let Connie take it from here and explain the steps she's taking to improve the lives of our furry friends.
S.P.C.A. stands for Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. And basically what we do in Taiwan is we try to help out animals. At the S.P.C.A., we have different departments doing different types of work. For example, we do humane animal welfare education in schools. And we also have our own curriculum that we're trying to push into schools as well. And we also do campaigning, lobbying the government for better laws to protect animals. And we also do animal cruelty investigations. So if anybody comes upon an animal that needs help or is being abused or neglected by their owners, they can report the case to us. And then our inspectors will actually go on site and try to collect evidence and work with the government as well to try to help these animals. We don't have a shelter in Taiwan, but we still do animal rehoming. So we rely on our fosters and some of our adoption corner partners to try to help rehome these animals that we do rescue.
What is the current status of animal rights in Taiwan? How are animals being treated? Is the government doing anything to protect them?
I would say that the animal welfare movement in Taiwan is really progressing. We started the organization 10 years ago. And from, just within these 10 years, I've noticed a lot of progress. And in terms of, for example, government authorities are actually really trying to do their job and, trying to talk with these different animal NGOs and to figure out what the problem is and how we can change things through legislation and through regulations. And for the public, I've noticed a lot of more people being more interested, I would say, in animal welfare issues. So we have a lot of young supporters. Just our fan page is growing, tremendously in the last 10 years. And I feel that our support base has grown quite a lot within these 10 years. So, every time we hold an event or we have an issue that we want the public to be aware about, the feedback has been really great. So I think, a lot of more Taiwanese people are beginning to care more and more about animals and not just dogs and cats. Like before we had a campaign to try to ban cosmetics animal testing. And that was really successful, although it took us 2 years to actually push through new legislation. But the support that we got throughout, the campaign really surprised me. A lot of people at first didn't know what the issue was about. But, after campaigning and letting raising public awareness, the feedback we got was really great.
So is it now illegal to test cosmetics on animals?
Yes, starting, I believe it's November of this year. So we pushed the law through in 2015. So beginning at the end of the year, the act is going to be enacted. So basically starting from the end of the year onwards, it's going to be illegal to test cosmetics on animals within Taiwan.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. You said how the S.P.C.A. goes to investigate animal cruelty allegations. Yeah. What would you say is one of the biggest challenges that you face doing these investigations?
Well, during these investigations, we have to follow the Animal Protection Act. So even as an NGO, if the current legislation doesn't, for example, doesn't ban a certain behavior or there are loopholes in the laws, then when we go on site, there is sometimes a limit to what we can do. So, that's why we have a lobbying department. So during our cases, we notice these loopholes or, things in the law that should be improved. Then we go back to our lobbying department and we try to figure out, how can we push through better legislation to help these animals? So when we do go on site and sometimes the law doesn't allow us to do anything else, we would spend the time to try to educate these owners. Even though they're not breaking the law specifically, but doesn't mean that the animal is being treated the best way that, it could be treated.
Could you give me an example of this?
For example, a lot of our cases involve long-term caging of animals. So, for example, an owner has a dog or cat, and a lot of times they're being kept in cages or locked up, in front of a warehouse or in front of their homes. Even though the law says you must provide the animal sufficient out-of-cage exercise time, it doesn't specify what the sufficient amount of time is.
I see.
Right. So we don't have a period of time that we, that is set by law that we can go and say, hey, by law, for example, you have to take your animal out every 24 hours. We don't have that, right? So we can only try to educate and say, well, all animals need exercise and they should not be long-term caged or chained to the side of your house.
Yes.
Yeah.
So is this one of the issues that your lobbyists are working on now?
Yes, it is something that we're trying to work on, trying to improve ownership responsibilities and not just lobbying. I mean, I think education is really important. I mean, you can have laws and you have the most strict laws, but if the public doesn't know about it or doesn't obey the law, then, other issues come up.
That's true. Do most of your cases see pets, or is it also on farms? Is it, where are some other places that you, besides people's homes, that you would go to? Okay,
so the cases we deal with are basically animals that are owned. So, right. So they could be pets, but they could also be, for example, farm animals, or they could be animals in exhibitions or in these leisure farms around the country. So in the past, we've dealt with cases at leisure farms that are open to the public where animals are being miscared for. And also in the past, we've dealt with endangered animals that are being privately kept. Right. So,
such as what?
Such as sun bears and such as orangutans.
Okay.
These cases are reported to us. We take all the cases. We don't only say yes to, cases involving dogs and cats. Yeah. So our cases, in the past, we've also dealt with ostriches, raccoons, all sorts of animals.
And are those animals illegal to own in Taiwan?
Some endangered animals are actually being kept legally, and that is because before the Wildlife Protection Act was enacted in Taiwan, a lot of people in Taiwan actually bought these endangered animals off the streets for a really low price.
Right.
So after the Wildlife Protection Act was enacted, they were they had to register with the government.
I see.
Right.
When was the Animal Protection Act enacted?
I believe it was 1989.
The reason I ask is because I came to Taiwan when I was a teenager, and it was in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And I noticed that it was the first time I had ever been to night markets or anything. And when I was there, all of the night markets sold animals in cages. Every single one sold them. And some of them you could find, you probably couldn't find a sun bear, but a lot of them you could find exotic looking animals. Now coming back to Taiwan, I was actually quite happy, but also surprised that doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
There's no animals in any of the night markets, at least in Taipei. The ones I've seen in Taipei. So was the S.P.C.A. involved in that, in getting rid of that sale?
The pet sales at night markets? Well, we were founded 10 years ago. So I think a lot of work was done before that as well.
I see.
But in the years that we've been around, we have seen a lot of progress. For example, you don't see the dogs and cats being sold at night markets because now the sellers have to get licenses. So it could be before that they didn't need licenses, so anyone could be selling on the streets. So the licensing of pet shops has become more strict. And recently, this year, they've revised the whole licensing process. So it's even more strict now. So if you wanted to sell dogs and cats, you have to apply for a license. But I have to say for other animals, for example, non-dogs and cats, for example, birds or fish or hamsters, you actually don't need a specific license for it.
I see.
Yeah, so it's something that still needs to be worked on.
I see.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most abused animal in Taiwan as of now?
That's a hard question. I would say that most people pay attention to dog and cat issues.
Yeah.
So you will see a lot more news, about the abuse of stray animals or, pet neglect, stories like this. But I mean, farm animals and wildlife, endangered species, I would say these animals need more attention. They need more people to realize that actually there's a huge problem. For example, the depletion of forests leading to more endangered animals.
Of course. Yeah.
Right. Or, farm animals, how they're treated in farms and before slaughter.
Yeah.
I think these are all huge issues that there needs to be more public awareness on it.
No, I would say I completely agree. This is going to maybe date my age, but in 1996 when I came here, there were stray dogs everywhere, all over the streets. Taiwan was a very different place that long ago, but how were the streets able to be cleaned up so quick?
Well, there are still stray animals now, but I guess compared to before, there are less that you see on like the streets in Taipei, for example.
Okay.
But there are still stray animals and the population is still pretty large. Why you don't see as many as you did before is because the government before actually did a huge, what we call like a street cleanup of these animals.
Okay.
And that is when they basically caught all the stray animals and started euthanizing them. And this was years before.
Okay.
This was perhaps like 15, 20 years ago.
Okay. So that wouldn't happen again now.
Because the public, has been aware of these problems. So right now, the new legislation is basically you can't euthanize animals in public shelters unless they have contagious diseases.
I see.
Right. But before, if the shelter got full, then the shelter staff, after 12 days, could decide whether or not they wanted to euthanize the animal in order to control the population within the shelter.
I see.
Right. But the new legislation that was passed 2 years ago forbids that. Okay. So basically, there's another problem that arises. If you can't euthanize at the shelters and then you still have these incoming animals, the problem is, okay, so the shelters get full, but then you can't catch any more animals.
Right.
So then if the government doesn't do a mass, for example, a mass TNR program,
which is what mass TNR?
Which is basically, TNR stands for trap, neuter, and release.
Okay.
So it's basically neutering these street animals and then putting them back because, if the shelters are full, there's nowhere else to put them.
Yes.
So it's a humane way of controlling the stray animal population is to neuter them.
Okay.
Right. So if the government doesn't do TNR on a massive scale, and then the public shelters are basically all full right now. There's over 30 public shelters in Taiwan, and most of them, to our knowledge, are at capacity. So, there comes a problem now is
how to
deal with it. Yeah.
So actually this is a good segue into my next question. And it's a debate that I've been having with people for a really long time. In Taiwan, I see a lot of dogs and cats not being neutered or spayed. And I was having a conversation with some people and they were saying that when you do this to an animal, it's a common misconception that it's good for them because a lot of people say, oh, can you imagine if you were neutered or you were spayed, your personality would be completely different. So what would you say about something like that?
All vets do encourage people to neuter their pets. There are many reasons why. A lot of misconceptions, like you said, okay, if I neutered my dog, he's going to gain weight.
Or have personality changes.
Exactly. Yeah. But these are all misconceptions. But so we talk to our vets, and all vets, if you talk to them, they will encourage you to get your dog neutered. Also, because one of the major things is it prevents a lot of cancers that occur in animals during their later lives.
Okay.
Right. And I mean, we've noticed a lot in our neutered animals that their behavior actually turns for the better, because a lot of dogs are not neutered when they go in heat. Perhaps they try to go outside or, they run away, you know. So these behavioral issues can be solved with neutering.
When I've mentioned these issues, oh no, it actually improves their behavior. A lot of the arguments that I've heard in return are, yeah, but that's natural. It's their natural behavior to want to go outside while they're in heat. It's their natural behavior to be a bit aggressive. So trying to control something for an owner's personal benefit is not ethical. But at the same time, I think you make valid points about not wanting to have a large stray population on the streets.
Yeah. A lot of people would say, well, my dog stays indoors all the time.
Yeah.
And if I do take him or her out, they're always on the leash. So even if they're not neutered, they're not going to, cause any problems. But, you never know when you take your dog outside and they get spooked, or, by cars or by, during Chinese New Year's, there's a lot of firecrackers. And there are a lot of situations that the dog just gets scared and they run away. And then if the dog is not neutered, it adds to the problem of the stray population, So even the government has realized this problem. So actually, by law, dog owners have to take their animal to be neutered.
I see. How about cat owners?
Cat owners, not yet.
Not
yes,
yet.
But for dogs, you do.
Dogs, you must.
You must.
Okay.
So,
what are the consequences if you don't?
Well, there's a fine, but there is a loophole.
Okay, what's the loophole?
So the loophole is the law says you have to take your dog to get neutered. But if you choose not to, or if your vet says there's a health issue, okay, which is understandable if, there's a health issue and you can't neuter your dog.
I understand a health issue, but I heard you say if you choose not to. So
Right.
if I say, you know what, no, I don't want to, that's okay.
Yes, that's okay, but you still have to register with the government, basically. So you have to fill out a form and telling the government, okay, what is your reason for not neutering your dog? And some might say, well, I hope that in a few years they can have puppies.
Yeah.
And the government, some cities will accept it because in the law, it doesn't really give them the right to say no to these applications.
Okay.
Right. But, a lot of times, for example, in Taipei or New Taipei City, the officials who have a better sense of animal welfare, they will try to, educate the owner and try to persuade them, oh, you should just neuter your dog instead of applying for this because it is better for the animal.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. What is an issue that maybe the S.P.C.A. sees a lot of and you would like to educate the public on?
I think, like I said before, majority of our cases deal with animals that are locked up.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think this happens as much in the West. They know that they should take the dog for a walk.
Yeah.
They need exercise. You need to play with your animal.
Yeah.
You need to spend time with them. But a lot of people in Taiwan, especially the older generation, usually doesn't believe that the dog needs exercise or that they need to spend time with the animal.
I see.
So they usually believe that as long as I provide food and water, as long as the animal doesn't die. We get that a lot.
Like a plant a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so we get that a lot, as long as the animal doesn't die, are you saying that I'm abusing it? And, then we have to go back and try to educate these people that, no, that's a very backwards way of thinking of, pet ownership. A pet really needs more than just food and water.
Course. If someone wants to have a domestic animal, where do you suggest they go and get this?
Well, if it's dogs and cats, there are many animals up for adoption at shelters, not just the government ones. A lot of the other NGOs also operate private shelters.
Yeah. What are some names of some NGOs that people could go to if they want to adopt?
There are so many. Animals Taiwan, I guess, would be familiar with listeners. Other, Taiwanese NGOs as well.
Okay.
A lot of actually non-NGOs like private feeders or individuals of the public. A lot of individuals in Taiwan actually operate shelters and they basically run it out of their own pockets.
I see.
Yeah, so there are many, many options. If you just do a Google search,
easy to find it.
It'd be very easy to find.
But what about the people who want kittens or puppies? I've heard a lot of shelters, if you adopt, you end up adopting a older animal. So how about people who are looking maybe to adopt, but really want to have a puppy or a kitten? What should they do?
Yeah, that's a huge misconception. People think that only older animals are, that can only be found in shelters. That's not true. A lot of the shelters have puppies.
Okay.
Yeah, so sometimes these puppies are rescued from the streets.
I see.
So from the unneutered, unspayed animals on the streets, they have puppies that are sometimes brought into the shelters.
Right.
That would be open up for adoption.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you recommend going to breeders at all?
I would encourage people to try to adopt before they think about buying an animal.
Yeah.
But if you do insist on a certain type of breed, I would recommend going to, licensed breeders and of course licensed pet shops. I believe most of the breeding facilities in Taiwan are not open to the regular public.
Okay.
Yeah, so you will have to go to the pet shops. But of course, pet shops need licenses and they need to display their license in store where customers can see.
Okay.
But I would really encourage people to consider adoption
Instead.
Yes.
How about animals that aren't dogs and cats? If someone wants a bird or a hamster, are there adoption agencies for these animals?
There actually are. So there's actually a rabbit rescue organization.
Is there?
Yeah.
Okay, what is that called?
It's called 爱兔协会.
Okay.
Yeah, so people can adopt rabbits that were abandoned, so they can go through them. There are other organizations like bird organizations that actually do adopt out birds that were rescued or abandoned by their owners. I mean, at the S.P.C.A, we've adopted out guinea pigs and birds.
How about like reptiles, like snakes and stuff?
I believe there is an organization that does that, but I can't remember the name right now.
Okay.
Yes, but you would be surprised like how many different types of animals that you can adopt.
That you can get. So actually, this is a good thing to know. Even if you want a weird animal, there's probably an adoption agency open.
Right.
You can save an animal's life instead of...
Right. I would discourage people from trying to get an exotic pet from a pet store.
What would you say is an exotic pet?
Well, for example, raccoons or squirrels.
Okay.
We've come upon cases where someone owned a raccoon.
I didn't realize you could even buy those in pet shops.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
And they kept the raccoon basically in a small dog cage for the majority of its life.
Okay.
But that raccoon was actually rescued by us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
And now he lives in a sanctuary in Pingdong.
Okay.
Yeah, so, most people can't provide sufficient space or care for these supposedly wild animals. I mean, I call them wild animals.
Yeah. Well, they are wild animals, really. They can't be domesticated.
In the West, I know a lot of people keep raccoons.
Do they? I didn't think so.
Yeah, I did a Google search and I was like, is this something that is common? And supposedly, in the West, like in the U.S., people do keep raccoons. But, land and space is so much more.
But I would be very surprised if you could buy a raccoon from a pet shop, though. I think you would have to, if you kept a raccoon or a squirrel, you would have to, catch it in your backyard. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
You would know more than I would, I think.
I don't know, the details of, of that in the U.S. But, in Taiwan, people could buy raccoons from a pet. Yeah.
So you can buy raccoons and squirrels and stuff. You can buy those at pet shops.
Yes. I mean, the law is you can't catch wild animals. Okay. So you can't catch these wild animals and then sell them.
Okay.
And that's the law. But the current pet stores, a lot of them would say, no, these weren't captured from the wild. They were bred in captivity. Right. So that's another problem, how to catch these pet stores and trying to catch them to see if what they're saying is true. And that really comes down, to the authorities. Yeah. That's their job to make sure that, what they're saying is in fact true and try to stop illegal behavior. But we've come across a lot of owners who kept raccoons and squirrels and all of their conditions, they were kept in awful conditions in small spaces. So we try to, discourage people from trying to get these exotic pets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where would you like to see animal rights in Taiwan in 10, 20 years?
Right. Well, I would like to see the government, as well as the public, paying more attention to other animal welfare issues regarding farm animals, wildlife, and animals in experiments, as well as animals in entertainment.
Okay.
I think that is something that needs a lot of work on. Mm-hmm. So like I mentioned before, most people still only care about dogs and cats and pets in general.
Okay. What are some things that the public can do or some of our listeners can do who are really passionate about animal rights?
Well, if you want to support the S.P.C.A., we are always looking for animal fosters. For example, if for an abuse case, sometimes we have to rescue the animals from their previous owners. So then they come into the S.P.C.A., we get their health checkups all done.
Okay.
And then we have to look for adopters. But sometimes looking for a new adopter, it takes a long period of time because the animals that we receive are usually from these neglect cases or abuse cases.
Right.
So many times they have, at the start, some behavioral issues.
Okay.
For example, some anxiety or some dogs don't really like men.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Yeah, so they're afraid of men. And it could be because their owner was a male and they used to beat them, for example. So these animals do need a foster home, someone who's patient
and understanding,
and try, and help us care for these animals temporarily until we find them a forever home.
Okay.
People can become our fosters or volunteer with us. For example, every month we hold 2 volunteer events where we take people to a government shelter in 瑞芳.
Okay.
瑞芳收容所.
Okay.
Okay, so and then we take our volunteers there and then we take all the shelter animals out for a walk. And if they need to be bathed, our volunteers do that.
Okay.
Yeah, and we try to socialize them, we play with them, and we give them some time to enjoy the sunshine, or else, apart from our volunteers, the other times, usually the shelter doesn't have any other volunteers that go up there because Ruifang it's more far away.
Okay.
It's harder for people to get to.
So do they have to drive, do they bring themselves or do you guys organize to bring everybody up?
Our volunteers can meet at the Ruifang train station.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we will organize, for example, carpooling or taxi rides where they can share, the taxi ride together and then go up to the shelter.
Okay.
But otherwise, we would meet at the shelter and then spend the whole day helping the animals, taking them out for walks and then feeding them, giving them treats, playing with them. Yeah, because we go twice a month and we wish to increase the times we go up, but really we need more volunteers in order for us to do that. So apart from the 2 times that we go up, the rest of the time the shelter doesn't have any other volunteers at all, which means the animals inside the shelter only get to come out twice a month.
Okay.
So the other times they're basically locked in their kennels.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they get walked and stuff.
No, they don't.
Oh, they don't.
They don't.
Really?
Yeah. The shelter staff are only responsible for cleaning and feeding.
Okay.
And there is a vet on site, who deals with, injuries and all that. But in terms of walking, socializing, it really depends on how many volunteers they get.
So how can someone become a volunteer or become a foster parent?
If you want to volunteer, with the S.P.C.A., you can go on our website, www.spca.org.tw.
Okay.
And you can fill out a application form, and then our staff will be in touch with you. Okay. For the shelter volunteering, you can also directly contact the shelter and say, I want to volunteer.
Yeah.
And
these are the days I'm available.
Exactly, and then they will be in touch with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there volunteering that can happen in Taipei City that people can do?
Yeah, there's a government shelter in Taipei City in Neihu.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So are those dogs also kept in the cage all day?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. Oh, that's
sad. All the
Yeah.
shelters operate like this. They depend on volunteers to help walk the dogs.
Okay. So you hear that, people. If you want to help innocent little dogs in shelters, and go volunteer and bring them for a walk, and I think that would make them really happy.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Is there anything else that you'd like to say? Any other place that people can go if they want to support you guys?
I just hope that people can help to spread awareness. A lot of times we post things on our Facebook or on our website, a lot of issues that we're dealing with, and sometimes we need the public support behind it. For example, petitions, or we're looking for a new adopter for a new animal that we rescued. Even though perhaps you can't help yourself, maybe just by sharing or spreading the word to your friends and family, or just even friends on Facebook, you know, it just helps to spread the message. And actually that helps us a lot. I hope people can go on our Facebook page. Which is if you just search Taiwan S.P.C.A.
Okay.
It should come up. We also have a Instagram account.
Okay. Which is also what?
TWSPCA. So if you just do a search, it should come up. We have a YouTube channel. If you just search S.P.C.A. Taiwan or Taiwan S.P.C.A., it should also come up. So yeah, if people can help share our social media pages, the more fans we have, the better we can spread what we're trying to
accomplish.
Exactly.
And I assume, although you haven't mentioned it because you're very polite, but I assume that people can make donations, right?
Yeah, so we have a donation page on our website as well. Okay. And you're right, we rely on public donations to maintain all of the work that we're doing. We don't receive government funding to help us operate on a daily basis. Sometimes we do apply for government subsidies for a specific project, but usually the money is not a lot, and we have to spend that money specifically for the project. Okay. But for all our other work that we're doing, we rely on the public to help us with that.
Thank you, Connie, so much for this amazing interview. It was so great to meet you.
Thank you for having me, really. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Taiwan Talk, and a big thank you to Connie Chiang for joining me this week. Remember, if you have a passion for animals and want to help support the S.P.C.A., visit www.spca.org.tw, where you can discover more about donations and volunteer opportunities. Remember to take care of yourselves. That's all for this week. I'm Sheree Felice.